handcuffs clicked shut at 5:33 a.m. on September 20, 2025, exactly 23 years after Melissa "Mel" Rodriguez, the 22-year-old singer-songwriter whose debut album had just gone platinum, vanished from her recording studio in West Hollywood. When FBI agents led away 68-year-old David Sterling, the legendary record producer whose name graced the credits of dozens of Grammy-winning albums, the collective gasp could be heard from the Hollywood Hills to the boardrooms of major record labels across Los Angeles. David Sterling wasn't just another music industry executive. He was a titan, the man who had discovered and shaped the careers of some of the biggest names in pop, rock, and R&B, whose Midas touch had generated billions in revenue, and whose recommendation could transform unknown artists into global superstars overnight. He was also the man who had produced Mel's breakthrough album, who had called her the voice of a generation, and who had spoken tearfully at her memorial concert about the tragic loss of such extraordinary talent. But as the FBI would reveal in the devastating evidence that followed, David Sterling had been hiding the most sinister secret in the music industry's history. Melissa Rodriguez was everything the music world had been searching for at the turn of the millennium. At 22, she possessed the rare combination of vocal prowess, songwriting ability, and authentic charisma that separated true artists from manufactured pop stars. Her voice, a soaring instrument that could convey both vulnerability and power, had the kind of timeless quality that reminded critics of Aretha Franklin and Whitney Houston. With her striking Latina features, cascading black hair, and the kind of magnetic stage presence that could command a stadium as easily as an intimate club, Mel had become the face of a new generation of artists who were bringing real emotion back to an increasingly commercialized industry. But Mel was more than just a beautiful voice. She was a gifted songwriter whose lyrics spoke to the experiences of young women navigating love, identity, and ambition in the early 2000s. Her debut album, Unfiltered, had topped the charts for 6 consecutive weeks and had spawned 3 #1 singles that were being played on radio stations across the country. What made Mel truly special was her authenticity. In an era when many artists were carefully manufactured by teams of writers and producers, Mel wrote her own songs, played multiple instruments, and insisted on having creative control over her music. She was outspoken about social issues, particularly those affecting Latino communities, and she used her growing platform to advocate for immigration reform and educational opportunities. Her success was meteoric. Unfiltered had been certified platinum within 3 months of release. MTV was playing her videos in heavy rotation. She had been nominated for 4 Grammy Awards, including Best New Artist. At 22, Mel was on the verge of the kind of superstardom that most artists only dream of achieving. On November 23, 2002, Mel was working on her follow-up album at Sterling Sound Studios, the legendary West Hollywood facility where David Sterling had recorded hits for decades. She had been putting in long hours, determined to prove that her debut success wasn't a fluke and that she had the depth and range to sustain a long career. Mel's best friend and backup singer, Carmen Silva, was the last person to see her alive. Carmen had stopped by the studio at 11:45 p.m. to bring Mel dinner and check on her progress with the new tracks. Mel was in an amazing mood, Carmen later told investigators. She had just finished recording a song that she said was the best thing she'd ever written. She was excited about the direction the new album was taking, but she also seemed nervous about something. When I asked what was wrong, she said she was having creative differences with David about the album's direction. Security footage from Sterling Sound Studios showed Mel leaving the building at 1:23 a.m. on November 24th, carrying her guitar case and a duffel bag containing her personal belongings. She appeared to be in conversation with someone off camera, gesturing animatedly as if making a point about something important. The footage showed Mel getting into a silver Mercedes that was waiting in the studio's parking lot. The license plate wasn't clearly visible due to the poor lighting, but investigators later determined the car belonged to David Sterling. Mel never made it home to her apartment in Beverly Hills. When she failed to show up for a scheduled interview with Rolling Stone magazine the following afternoon, her manager became concerned and called the police. Detective Sarah Martinez of the LAPD's Hollywood Division was assigned to the case within hours of the missing person report being filed. Martinez recognized immediately that this wasn't a typical missing person case. Mel was at the height of her career, had no personal problems that would cause her to disappear voluntarily, and had been in an environment where she should have been completely safe. The initial investigation revealed several disturbing facts. Mel's cell phone, a silver Motorola flip phone that she was rarely without, was found smashed in a dumpster behind a gas station in downtown LA. The phone had been destroyed so thoroughly that recovering any data was impossible with 2002 technology. More troubling was what investigators found at Mel's apartment. While there were no signs of forced entry or struggle, several personal items that friends insisted Mel would never leave behind, including her grandmother's rosary and a journal where she wrote lyrics, were missing. The investigation expanded rapidly as news of Mel's disappearance spread. The music industry rallied around the search effort, with fellow artists organizing benefit concerts and offering rewards for information. David Sterling was particularly vocal in his support, appearing on television to plead for Mel's safe return and describing her as not just a client, but like a daughter to me. Sterling told investigators that he had given Mel a ride home from the studio that night, dropping her off at her apartment around 2 a.m. He claimed their conversation had been routine, discussing plans for the new album and her upcoming promotional tour. When detectives asked about the creative differences Carmen had mentioned, Sterling dismissed them as normal artistic tensions between producer and artist. He said Mel had been passionate about her vision, but that they had been working through their disagreements professionally. Sterling's alibi seemed solid. He claimed to have returned home to his Malibu estate after dropping off Mel, where his wife confirmed he had been for the rest of the night. There was no evidence to contradict their story, and Sterling's cooperation with the investigation appeared complete. The case began attracting national attention when Mel's story was featured on major news programs and crime shows. The image of a beautiful young Latina singer who had achieved the American dream only to vanish without a trace captured public imagination and generated thousands of tips from across the country. Unfortunately, none of the leads proved credible. Despite extensive searches of remote areas around Los Angeles, extensive interviews with everyone in Mel's professional and personal circles, and analysis of her financial records and communications, investigators found no concrete evidence of what had happened to her. The case officially went cold in 2004, though Mel's family never stopped searching for answers. They hired private investigators, consulted with psychics, and continued advocating for media attention. David Sterling remained supportive throughout their ordeal, often calling to check on them and contributing to reward funds. The music industry mourned Mel as a rising star whose potential had been cut short by tragedy. Her unfinished second album was completed posthumously using demo recordings, becoming a tribute to her talent and a reminder of what the world had lost. David Sterling produced the album pro bono, saying it was his way of honoring Mel's memory. FBI Special Agent Jennifer Walsh joined the Bureau's cold case unit in 2018, 16 years after Mel's disappearance. Walsh specialized in cases involving violence against women in the entertainment industry, and she brought both advanced investigative techniques and deep understanding of industry dynamics to cold cases. Walsh's review of the Melissa Rodriguez case began in late 2024, focusing on evidence that might not have been properly analyzed using 2002-era technology. She was particularly interested in DNA evidence collected from Mel's apartment and car, believing it might yield information that wasn't detectable 23 years earlier. The breakthrough came from reanalysis of trace evidence found in the Mercedes that had picked up Mel from the studio. Advanced DNA extraction techniques revealed genetic material that matched neither Mel nor David Sterling, suggesting a third person had been in the vehicle. More significantly, Walsh discovered financial records that had been overlooked during the original investigation. Sterling Sound Studio's corporate accounts showed payments to several individuals with connections to organized crime, payments that had been disguised as studio rental fees and equipment purchases. Digging deeper into Sterling's background, Walsh uncovered a pattern of allegations that had been quietly settled over the years. Multiple female artists had accused Sterling of sexual harassment, assault, and in some cases, threats of violence. These allegations had been handled through confidential settlements and non-disclosure agreements, keeping them hidden from public view. Most disturbing were psychiatric records Walsh obtained through court order, revealing that Sterling had a history of violent behavior toward women that dated back to the 1980s. He had been hospitalized several times for what medical records described as episodes of uncontrolled rage. But his wealth and influence had kept these incidents out of the media. Armed with this new information, Walsh obtained warrants to search Sterling's current properties and business records. What she found there would expose 23 years of lies and manipulation. Hidden in Sterling's Malibu estate were dozens of audio and video recordings of female artists in compromising situations, including several featuring Mel Rodriguez. The recordings revealed that Sterling had been systematically documenting his interactions with vulnerable young women, apparently for blackmail purposes. But the most damning evidence was found in Sterling's private office, a detailed journal where he had documented his crimes over the decades. The journal entries revealed a disturbing pattern of targeting young female artists who showed signs of independence or who threatened to expose his behavior. The entry for November 23, 2002, provided the missing piece of the puzzle. MR has become a problem. Too independent, too willing to challenge my authority. She's threatening to find a new producer, says she wants creative control over her career. She doesn't understand that I made her and I can unmake her just as easily. Tonight I'll teach her who really controls her destiny. Additional entries revealed that Sterling had been planning Mel's elimination for weeks, recognizing that her growing independence and industry connections made her too dangerous to control through traditional means. Digital forensics experts found evidence that Sterling had used his industry connections to hire professional criminals to dispose of Mel's body and eliminate evidence. Bank records showed payments to individuals known to law enforcement as specialists in making problems disappear permanently. Confronted with this overwhelming evidence, Sterling initially maintained his innocence and claimed the journal entries were fictional, part of a novel he had been writing. But as additional evidence mounted, including DNA matches and financial records connecting him to organized crime figures, his story began to crumble. The confession came during Sterling's fifth interrogation session with Agent Walsh and LAPD detectives. After 23 years of living with his secret, David Sterling finally revealed what had happened to Melissa Rodriguez on November 24, 2002. According to Sterling's confession, he had lured Mel from the studio that night by claiming he wanted to discuss a lucrative recording contract with a major label. But when they reached his car, he had forced her at gunpoint to get in, taking her to a remote location where he had arranged to meet his criminal associates. Sterling admitted that he had intended to intimidate Mel into signing a contract that would give him complete control over her career and finances. But when she refused and threatened to expose his criminal activities to law enforcement, he had ordered her death. Sterling confessed that Mel's body had been disposed of in the Pacific Ocean, weighted down so it would never be recovered. He had spent the following days systematically destroying evidence and creating false alibis with the help of criminal associates who specialized in covering up violent crimes. The confession explained the sophisticated cover-up that had allowed Sterling to avoid suspicion for 23 years. His position of power in the music industry had given him access to resources and credibility that made his denials believable. His public participation in the search efforts had been calculated to monitor the investigation and maintain his reputation as a concerned mentor. Most horrifying was Sterling's revelation that Mel wasn't his first victim. Over the decades, he had orchestrated the deaths of at least 6 other young female artists who had threatened to expose his behavior or challenged his control. Their cases had never been connected because they had occurred in different cities and had been made to appear as accidents, suicides, or random violence. The arrest of David Sterling sent shockwaves through the music industry that reverberated from Los Angeles to Nashville to New York. For 23 years, the industry had mourned Melissa Rodriguez as a talented artist whose life had been cut short by unknown circumstances. The revelation that she had been murdered by one of the industry's most respected figures, a man who had built his reputation on discovering and nurturing young talent, while systematically exploiting and eliminating those who resisted, shattered the music world's sense of safety and trust. Mel's family, her parents Roberto and Maria Rodriguez and her younger sister Sofia, finally had answers to the questions that had tormented them for over 2 decades. But the truth brought devastating realization about how completely they had been deceived. "He hugged us at Mel's memorial service," Maria Rodriguez said through tears at the press conference announcing the arrest. He told us how much he missed her, how her voice would live on forever through her music, all while knowing he had silenced that voice himself. The trial of David Sterling began in January 2025 and lasted 8 months. The prosecution, led by U.S. Attorney Michael Chun, presented a methodical case built on DNA evidence, financial records, journal entries, and testimony from surviving victims of Sterling's decades-long pattern of abuse. The defense team attempted to argue that the journal entries were works of fiction and that Sterling was being framed by business rivals seeking to destroy his legacy. They portrayed him as a dedicated producer who had devoted his life to supporting young artists. But the jury wasn't convinced by the defense arguments. The physical evidence was overwhelming, and testimony from multiple victims painted a clear picture of systematic predation that had escalated to murder when his control was threatened. After deliberating for 24 hours over 4 days, the jury returned guilty verdicts on all charges: first-degree murder, multiple counts, racketeering, sexual assault, and tax evasion. The evidence showed that Sterling had not only killed Mel and other artists, but had operated a criminal enterprise based on exploiting vulnerable young women. Judge Patricia Williams sentenced David Sterling to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus additional consecutive terms for the other crimes. At 68 years old, Sterling will spend the remainder of his life behind bars for crimes that had remained hidden for over 2 decades. During the sentencing hearing, several of Sterling's surviving victims testified about the abuse they had suffered and the ways it had destroyed their careers and lives. Their testimony revealed the scope of his predatory behavior and the institutional failures that had enabled it to continue. Rebecca Torres, now a successful songwriter who had been one of Sterling's artists in the 1990s, addressed the court directly. David Sterling didn't just murder Mel Rodriguez. He murdered her dreams, her voice, her future contributions to music. But he also destroyed the lives and careers of dozens of other women who survived his abuse. The music industry failed Mel by protecting his reputation instead of investigating the complaints against him. The major record labels and music industry organizations launched comprehensive reviews of their policies regarding producer-artist relationships. The industry has since implemented stronger reporting mechanisms, mandatory training programs, and independent oversight of allegations involving abuse of power. Melissa Rodriguez's legacy lives on through the Mel Rodriguez Foundation for Artist Safety, established by her family to support young musicians while advocating for safer working conditions in the entertainment industry. The foundation has pushed for legislative changes requiring background checks for producers and mandatory reporting procedures for suspected abuse. Mel died trying to maintain her artistic integrity and independence, Roberto Rodriguez said at the foundation's annual gala. She refused to be controlled or silenced, even when it cost her everything. Through this foundation, her fight for artistic freedom and personal safety continues. The case has become a landmark in ongoing conversations about abuse of power in the entertainment industry. It has highlighted the vulnerability of young artists who depend on powerful producers and executives for career advancement, and the ways predators can use institutional protection to continue their crimes. Dr. Lisa Martinez, a psychologist specializing in trauma in creative industries, consulted on the case and its broader implications. The Melissa Rodriguez case illustrates how the pursuit of profit and power in the entertainment industry can create environments where predators thrive. When complaints are silenced through legal intimidation and financial settlements, patterns of abuse remain hidden and dangerous individuals are free to continue targeting new victims. The music industry has implemented significant changes in response to Mel's case. Major labels have established independent reporting systems for abuse allegations, mandatory oversight of producer-artist relationships, and regular training on recognizing and preventing exploitation. Contemporary artists have embraced Mel's music as both prophetic and revolutionary. Her songs about female empowerment and resistance to control have gained new relevance in the #MeToo era, and her unfinished second album is now regarded as one of the most important works of early 2000s pop music. As of today, September 21, 2025, David Sterling remains in federal prison, where he is serving his life sentence. He has shown no remorse for his crimes and has refused to provide information about the locations of his other victims' remains, depriving their families of closure. The case serves as a stark reminder that artistic genius and predatory behavior can coexist, that positions of power in creative industries can be weaponized against vulnerable young people, and that the pursuit of commercial success must never come at the cost of basic human safety and dignity. Melissa Rodriguez was 22 years old when her life was stolen by someone she trusted to guide her career. Her dreams of using her voice to inspire and empower others died with her in a remote location where she should never have been taken, killed by a mentor who had built his empire on the talents of countless young women. But her memory lives on as a catalyst for change, a reminder that protecting young artists is more important than protecting industry reputations, and that authentic voices, like Mel's, can never truly be silenced, even by those who try to control them through violence and fear. The recording studios and concert halls of Los Angeles continue to nurture new generations of musical talent, but Mel's story serves as a permanent reminder that mentorship without accountability can become predation, and that the most dangerous threats to artistic expression often come from within the very institutions that claim to support it.